This is furious HOA Karens. A snow route sign turned into her favorite threat. The tow operator stared at Karen and she screamed that she was board leadership and he needed to hook my car now because of a snow violation. You ignored my notices and now you get the consequences. She jabbed her phone at me like it was a warrant. I had 15 minutes to pick up my daughter from school and this woman was standing in my driveway with a flatbed idling behind her. All because I had a ski rack on my car. Welcome to the Quarry Ridge Frostline Community Association, where winter turns every board member into a warlord, and every snowflake is probable cause. I am a customer service supervisor at a call center, which means I record every conversation legally, and I know how to stay calm when someone is losing their mind at me. Rebecca Anderson, social committee chair and self-appointed snow enforcer, did not know that yet. She thought volume was authority. I held up one hand. I am leaving in 2 minutes to get my daughter. You can leave the notice, and I will respond in writing. Rebecca smiled like a shark. Too late for that. You have been non-compliant for 6 days, and you are blocking pedestrian access during a snow emergency. I glanced at the ski rack. It was perpendicular to the curb, mounted on my car which was parked in my own driveway. The sidewalk was 10 feet away and totally clear. I pointed that out. Rebecca snapped her fingers at the tow operator. Hook it. The driver, a tired-looking guy in a neon vest, hesitated. He looked at me. Sir, is this your property? I nodded. Yes, this is my driveway. He looked back at Rebecca. Ma'am, I cannot tow a car off private property without the owner's consent or a court order. Rebecca's face went red. I am the board president. This is an HOA matter. The driver shook his head. That does not change the law. Rebecca whipped around to face me. Fine. Then you are banned from the gate and all amenities effective immediately. I will file a lien for non-compliance fees and you will not be able to sell this house until you pay. She turned and marched to her white Lexus, slamming the door hard enough that snow slid off the roof. The tow truck backed out slowly. I stood there with my snow shovel handle in one hand, watching her taillights disappear around the corner. I got in my car and drove to the school. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I bought this house in Lewisville, Texas 2 years ago because the schools were good and the neighborhood looked quiet. The HOA seemed normal at first. Monthly dues, basic landscaping rules, a clubhouse nobody used. Then we had our first winter storm last year and everything changed. Rebecca formed something she called the Snow Patrol, which was just her and 2 other board members driving around with clipboards and a cordless leaf blower. They would document violations, blow snow off the notices so they could take photos for evidence, and fine you if you did not shovel your driveway within 12 hours of the last flake falling. The fines started at $50 and doubled every day. I made it to the pickup line with 3 minutes to spare. My daughter climbed in, chattering about her art project. I smiled and nodded and drove home, my brain already running through every HOA rule I had ever signed. When I got home, there was already a new notice zip-tied to my mailbox. It was a printed storm photo packet showing my car from 3 angles, each photo annotated with circles and arrows. No readable text, but the message was clear. Rebecca had been stalking my property with a camera. The violation summary claimed my ski rack extended beyond the roofline and created a pedestrian hazard during snow route enforcement. The fine was $50, due in 48 hours, with a penalty doubling clause if I did not submit a compliance photo. I took the packet inside and photographed every page with my phone. Then I called the management company. A board woman answered and told me disputes had to be submitted in writing within 10 business days. I asked if I could email it. She said no, certified mail only, and they had to receive it before the fine due date or it would be considered an admission of guilt. I hung up and started drafting a letter. That night I went online and pulled the county ordinances for snow removal. There was nothing about roof racks. There was nothing about ski racks. The only pedestrian access rule was about maintaining a clear path on public sidewalks, and my car was not blocking any sidewalk. I screenshotted everything, printed it, and put it in an envelope with my dispute letter. I drove to the post office the next morning and sent it certified with return receipt. Then I called a real estate attorney I knew from work. He listened to the whole story and sighed. HOAs are tough because they write their own rules, and the burden is on you to prove they are unreasonable. You need to document everything. Save every notice, every email, every interaction. If she is trespassing on your property to take photos, that is a separate issue. Get cameras up. I thanked him and hung up. I already had a doorbell camera. I checked the footage from the last week. Rebecca had been on my property 3 times after dark. Twice, she walked up my driveway and took photos of my car with a flash. Once she stood on my front step and peered in the window. I saved all 3 clips to a thumb drive and made a backup. Then I went outside and moved my car into the garage. If she wanted photos, she would have to trespass to get them. That decision saved me, but it also made her escalate. The next morning, I got an email from the management company saying my gate access had been temporarily suspended due to non-compliance. I called immediately. The same board woman answered. She said the board had flagged my account and I needed to resolve the violation before access would be restored. I told her I had submitted a dispute and was waiting for a response. She said disputes do not stop enforcement. I asked to speak to her supervisor. She put me on hold for 9 minutes, then came back and said the supervisor was unavailable and I should attend the next board meeting if I wanted to appeal. The meeting was in 3 weeks. My daughter had school every day. I worked nights. I needed that gate access. I tested the gate that afternoon. Red error. I tried my backup code. Red error. I called the management company again and got voicemail. I left a message. Then I called the gate vendor, a local tech company that installed the system. A guy named Rick answered. He pulled up my account and whistled. Yeah, your profile is flagged. That is a manual lockout. Someone from the board submitted a request this morning. I asked if he could override it. He said no, but he could pull the access logs and email them to me if I wanted proof of the timeline. I said yes, please. He sent the file 20 minutes later. The lockout request came from Rebecca Anderson at exactly 8:42 in the morning, 6 minutes after I sent my certified dispute letter. I saved the email and added it to my evidence folder. That weekend, I got a knock on the door. A neighbor I barely knew, a guy named Paul who lived 3 houses down, was standing on my porch holding a casserole dish. He said his wife made extra and thought I might need a friendly face. I invited him in. We sat at my kitchen table and he told me Rebecca had been talking about me in the neighborhood group chat. She posted photos of my car and said I was refusing to comply with snow safety rules, putting children at risk, and ignoring board authority. Paul said it was getting ugly. A few people were defending me, but most were staying quiet. He pulled out his phone and showed me the thread. Rebecca had written that I was not the first person she had corrected, and I would not be the last. She said I do not negotiate with winter violations and that the board had a responsibility to protect property values. Paul scrolled down. Another board member, a guy named Steve, had replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a comment about how strict enforcement keeps the neighborhood clean. I took screenshots of everything. Paul watched me. You are building a case. I nodded. I am trying to sell this house. If she files a lien, I am stuck. Paul leaned back. She has done this before. Last year, she went after a family for parking their truck in the driveway during a snowstorm. They moved out 6 months later. I asked if they fought it. Paul shook his head. They paid the fines and left. I was not going to pay. I was not going to leave quietly. But I also knew I had to be smart. Rebecca had the board behind her, the management company in her pocket, and a neighborhood full of people too scared or too indifferent to push back. I needed an ally who could not be intimidated and evidence so clean that no one could ignore it. I already had Paul as a witness and Rick the gate vendor as a paper trail. What I needed next was proof that Rebecca was lying about the rules. I spent Sunday afternoon at the city planning office. The clerk pulled the snow emergency ordinance and the right-of-way access codes. I read through every page. There was nothing about roof racks, ski racks, or vehicle accessories. The only rule was about maintaining a 36-inch clear path on public sidewalks. I asked the clerk if the HOA could add restrictions beyond the city code. She said yes if it was in the covenants and restrictions, but they could not misrepresent city law. I asked for a certified copy of the ordinance. She printed it, stamped it, and handed it over. I paid $5 and walked out with the document in a folder. Monday morning, the management company finally responded to my dispute. It was a form letter saying my appeal had been reviewed and denied because the violation was substantiated by photographic evidence and board testimony. The fine was now $100 and would double again in 48 hours if not paid. They included a new notice with a hearing date. The hearing was scheduled for the same night as my daughter's school concert. I called my attorney again. He told me to request a reschedule in writing and to show up anyway if they refused. He also said to bring every piece of evidence I had and to record the meeting if Texas law allowed. I looked it up. Texas is a one-party consent state. I could record as long as I was present. I sent the reschedule request and started charging my phone. Tuesday afternoon, I saw Rebecca outside my house again. She was standing on the curb with her cordless leaf blower, clearing snow off a new notice she had just placed on my mailbox. She blew the snow away in short bursts, then stepped back and took photos with her phone. I watched from the window. She did not see me. She finished, walked back to her car, and drove away. I went outside and grabbed the notice. It was another storm photo packet, this time showing my car in the garage with the door half open. She had taken the photo from the street, but the angle suggested she had walked up my driveway to get a clear shot. I checked my doorbell footage. She had. She had walked 10 feet onto my property, stopped, taken 3 photos, and left. I saved the clip and added it to the thumb drive. That was 4 times now. 4 times trespassing, all on video. I nodded like I was losing, because I wanted her to get comfortable. Wednesday, my gate access was still suspended. I had to park on the street outside the neighborhood and walk in every time I needed to get home. It added 10 minutes to every trip. My daughter asked why we could not use the gate. I told her it was broken. She asked when it would be fixed. I said soon. I did not tell her that the HOA was trying to make us leave. That night, I got a call from the management company. A different woman, older, more official. She said the board had voted to escalate my case to a formal compliance hearing and that I was now banned from using any community amenities, including the pool, the clubhouse, and the guest parking, until the matter was resolved. I asked if that included the gate. She said the gate suspension was separate, but yes, it would remain in effect. I asked who voted. She said board votes were confidential. I asked for the meeting minutes. She said they would be available in 30 days. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Rick, the gate vendor, again. Rick was apologetic. He said he could not restore my access without board approval, but he could tell me that the original lockout request cited a safety concern. I asked what kind of safety concern. He paused. It says non-compliance with emergency snow route protocols. I asked if that was a real category in the system. He laughed. No, that is custom text. Someone typed that in manually. I asked if he could send me a screenshot of the request form. He said he could not, but he could confirm that the request was submitted by Rebecca Anderson and approved by the board president, who was also Rebecca Anderson. I thanked him and added that detail to my notes. She had locked me out using her own authority, citing a rule that did not exist, and the management company had rubber-stamped it without question. I spent Thursday organizing everything. I had the city ordinance, the gate access logs, the group chat screenshots, the doorbell trespassing footage, Rebecca's storm photo packets, the management company emails, and Paul's witness statement. I put it all in a binder with tabs and page numbers. Then I made 3 copies. One for me, one for my attorney, and one to bring to the hearing. I also wrote a timeline document summarizing every interaction, every notice, every fine, and every escalation. It was 6 pages long. I printed it and added it to the binder. My attorney reviewed everything Friday morning and called me back in the afternoon. He said I had a strong case for harassment, abuse of authority, and possibly trespassing if I wanted to file a police report. He also said the HOA was vulnerable because they had misrepresented the city ordinance in writing, which could open them up to a bad faith claim. I asked what that meant. He said if I could prove they knew the rule was fake and enforced it anyway, I could sue for damages and attorney fees. I asked what I needed to prove it. He said a smoking gun. Some kind of internal communication showing intent. If you are enjoying this story, please hit like and subscribe because it helps me keep making these videos and I have a lot more HOA nightmares to share. I did not have that smoking gun yet, but I had a feeling it existed. Rebecca was too confident, too aggressive. She was not making this up on the fly. She had a plan. I just needed to find it. That night, Paul texted me. He said the group chat had blown up again. Rebecca had posted a long message saying the board was taking a firm stance on winter violations because too many residents were ignoring the rules, and it was creating liability for the association. She said the board had a duty to enforce the covenants and that anyone who refused to comply would face progressive penalties, including fines, amenity bans, and liens. She ended with, "This is not personal. This is policy." Paul sent me screenshots. I read through them. Then I scrolled to the replies. Most people were silent. A few posted supportive comments. One person, a woman named Angela, replied with a question. She asked what specific rule covered ski racks. Rebecca replied immediately. Obstruction of pedestrian access during emergency snow operations. It is in the covenants. Angela asked for the page number. Rebecca did not reply. I looked up the covenants that night. I had a copy in my file cabinet from when I bought the house. I read through the entire snow removal section. There was nothing about ski racks, there was nothing about roof racks, there was nothing about vehicle accessories at all. The only mention of pedestrian access was a clause requiring residents to keep sidewalks clear within 24 hours of a snowfall. My car was not blocking any sidewalk. My ski rack was not blocking any sidewalk. Rebecca had made it up. I took photos of the relevant pages and sent them to Paul. He replied with 3 exclamation points. Then he said, "This is huge." I agreed. But I still needed the smoking gun. I needed proof that Rebecca knew she was lying. That is when I remembered the twist. Paul had mentioned it in passing last weekend. He said Rebecca had a group chat with the other board members, separate from the neighborhood chat. He did not have access to it, but he knew it existed because his wife had accidentally been added once and saw a few messages before being removed. I asked Paul if his wife remembered anything from those messages. He said he would ask. Paul texted me back Saturday morning. His wife remembered one message clearly. Rebecca had written something like, "We need to make an example of someone so people take the snow rules seriously," and another board member had replied with a name. The name was mine. Paul said his wife was willing to testify to that if it came to it. I thanked him and added her to my witness list. That was the smoking gun. Rebecca had targeted me intentionally, not because I was violating a rule, but because she wanted to scare the neighborhood into compliance. It was not enforcement. It was punishment. I called my attorney and told him. He said that changed everything. If we could get that message, or even a credible witness statement about it, we could argue bad faith and potentially sue for harassment, emotional distress, and attorney fees. He said to keep pushing and to document every new interaction. I promised I would. Monday morning, I got another notice. This one was hand-delivered by Steve, the other board member who had supported Rebecca in the group chat. He knocked on my door, handed me an envelope, and walked away without saying anything. I opened it. It was a lien notice. The HOA was filing a lien on my property for $600 in unpaid fines, plus administrative fees, plus interest. The total was $873. If I did not pay within 10 days, they would proceed with foreclosure proceedings. I read it twice. Foreclosure. Over a ski rack. I took a photo and sent it to my attorney. He called me 5 minutes later. This is insane. They cannot foreclose over an $873 lien without going through the courts, and no judge is going to approve this. But they can cloud your title and make it impossible to sell. You need to fight this now. I told him I was planning to. He said good, because we were going to bury them. That afternoon, I filed a records request with the management company. I asked for every board meeting minute from the last 12 months, every email or memo related to snow enforcement, and every compliance file with my name on it. Texas law requires HOAs to provide records within 10 business days. I sent the request certified mail and emailed a copy to my attorney. Then I started preparing for the hearing. It was scheduled for Wednesday night at 7. I had already requested a reschedule and been denied. I told my daughter's school I would miss the concert. I hated that. But if I did not show up to the hearing, Rebecca would win by default. My attorney said he could not attend, but he would be on standby by phone. I printed my binder, charged my phone, and mentally rehearsed every argument I was going to make. Wednesday night, I arrived at the clubhouse at 6:50. The parking lot was nearly empty. Rebecca's Lexus was there, Steve's truck was there, a third car I did not recognize, and a tow truck, idling near the entrance with the flatbed down and the hook visible. I parked as far away as I could and walked toward the clubhouse door. Rebecca was standing outside with Steve and another woman I had never met. She saw me and smiled. "Glad you could make it." I did not respond. I walked past her and opened the door. She called after me. "The meeting starts at 7. You will wait until we call you in." I turned around. "I am here for a hearing. I have a right to be present." She shook her head. "That is not how this works. You wait outside until we are ready." I pulled out my phone and started recording. Rebecca's face changed. "What are you doing?" I said I am recording this meeting because Texas is a one-party consent state and I have a right to document HOA proceedings. She stepped closer. "You are not recording me." I kept the camera on her. "I am recording the meeting. You are free to leave the frame." She looked at Steve. Steve shrugged. "I do not think he can do that." I said, "Actually, I can. Check your bylaws." Rebecca turned and walked inside, slamming the door behind her. Steve and the other woman followed. I waited in the hallway. 10 minutes later, Steve opened the door and told me to come in. I walked into the clubhouse meeting room. It was a small space with a folding table at the front and a few chairs scattered around. Rebecca sat in the center chair with Steve on her left and the other woman on her right. A laptop was open in front of Rebecca. No one else was there. I sat down in the front row and set my binder on my lap. Rebecca cleared her throat. "This is a compliance hearing for property address on file regarding violations of snow removal and pedestrian access rules. You have been fined $600 for repeated non-compliance. Do you have anything to say?" I opened my binder and stood up. "Yes. I have documentation showing that the rule you are enforcing does not exist in the covenants, the city ordinance, or any legitimate HOA policy. I also have evidence that you misrepresented city law in writing, trespassed on my property multiple times to gather evidence, and targeted me intentionally as part of a campaign to intimidate the neighborhood." Rebecca stared at me. "That is a serious accusation." I said it is a factual statement and I can prove all of it. I pulled out the certified city ordinance and handed it to Rebecca. This is the City Snow Emergency Code. There is no mention of roof racks or vehicle accessories. I pulled out the covenant pages. This is the HOA covenant section on snow removal. There is no mention of roof racks or vehicle accessories. I pulled out the gate access logs. This is documentation showing you locked me out of the gate 6 minutes after I filed a dispute, using a fabricated safety concern. Rebecca pushed the papers away. This is out of order. You are supposed to be answering questions, not making accusations. I said I am presenting evidence. You are supposed to be conducting a fair hearing. She stood up. This hearing is over. You are non-compliant and the fines stand. I pulled out my phone and held it up. I have video of you trespassing on my property 4 times in the last 2 weeks. I have a witness statement from a neighbor saying you posted in the board group chat that you wanted to make an example of me. And I have testimony from the gate vendor confirming you manually locked me out without cause. Do you want me to submit this to the county, or do you want to drop the fines and the lien? Rebecca's face went pale. She looked at Steve. Steve looked at the other woman. The other woman looked at the laptop. Nobody said anything. Then Rebecca sat down slowly. Where did you get that information? I said it does not matter. What matters is that I have it. It is admissible. And if you proceed with this lien, I will file a lawsuit for harassment, bad faith enforcement, and abuse of authority. My attorney is ready to go. Rebecca stared at me for a long moment. Then she said we need to take a recess to consult with the management company. I said fine, I will wait outside. I walked out and stood in the hallway. My hands were shaking. I texted my attorney. He replied immediately, "Good job, do not back down." I waited 20 minutes. Then Steve opened the door and told me to come back in. Rebecca was still sitting at the table, but her posture was different. She looked smaller. She did not make eye contact. Steve cleared his throat. The board has decided to table your case pending further review. The fines are suspended and the lien will not be filed. Your gate access will be restored within 24 hours. I said, what about the amenity ban? Steve nodded. That is also lifted. I said I want that in writing. Rebecca finally looked up. You will get a letter. I said I want it tonight. She exhaled slowly. Fine, I will email it to you before 9. I nodded. Thank you. I turned and walked out. The tow truck was gone. I got the email at 8:47. It was short and formal. The board had decided to suspend enforcement pending a policy review. All fines were waived. All access restrictions were lifted. I forwarded it to my attorney and to Paul. Paul replied with a champagne emoji. My attorney replied with next steps. He said I should still file a complaint with the county to get the snow enforcement policy audited, and I should consider a small claims suit to recover my attorney fees and the cost of the records requests. I said I would think about it. That night, I slept better than I had in 2 weeks. But I was not done yet. Rebecca had backed down, but she had not been held accountable. The policy was still broken. The board was still running unchecked, and I still wanted to sell my house without a cloud on my title. Thursday morning, I filed a formal complaint with the county HOA ombudsman. I attached every piece of evidence I had: the city ordinance, the covenant pages, the trespassing videos, the group chat screenshots, the gate access logs, and the witness statements. I wrote a cover letter summarizing the timeline and the abuse. I asked for a full audit of the HOA compliance process and a review of the board's authority. The ombudsman replied 2 days later. They said they would open an investigation and contact the management company for records. I also filed a small claims suit against the HOA for $800 in damages, which covered my attorney consult fees, the records request costs, and the time I lost dealing with the gate lockout. The filing fee was $50. The court date was set for 6 weeks out. I mailed a copy of the suit to the management company and to Rebecca personally. The neighborhood group chat exploded. Someone, probably Paul, leaked the fact that I had sued the HOA. Rebecca posted a long message saying the board had acted in good faith and that I was being vindictive and litigious. She said the association would defend itself vigorously. Angela, the woman who had asked for the page number, replied. She said if the board acted in good faith, they should have no problem showing the rule in writing. She asked again for the covenant page number. Rebecca did not reply. 3 other people chimed in, asking the same question. Then someone else said they had received a similar fine last year and paid it without questioning it. Another person said the same thing. By the end of the day, 7 people had come forward saying they had been fined for violations that were not in the covenants. Paul texted me, "You just started a revolution." 2 weeks later, the HOA held an emergency general meeting. It was not on the normal schedule. The management company sent a notice saying the board needed to address concerns about enforcement policies. I showed up early. The clubhouse was packed. Every chair was full. People were standing in the back. Paul was there. Angela was there. The 7 people who had been fined were there. Rebecca sat at the front table with Steve and the other board member, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. The meeting started at 7. The management company rep, a man in a cheap suit, opened with a prepared statement about how the board had reviewed the snow enforcement policy and decided to suspend it pending a full revision. Angela raised her hand. "Can you explain why the policy was enforced for 2 years if it was not in the covenants?" The rep looked at Rebecca. Rebecca said the board interpreted the pedestrian access clause broadly to include vehicle obstructions. Angela said that is not what the clause says. "Can you show us where it says that?" Rebecca did not answer. Another resident stood up. "I paid $300 in fines last year. Do I get a refund?" The rep said refunds would be considered on a case-by-case basis. Someone shouted that is not good enough. The room erupted. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. It was chaos. People demanded accountability, refunds, resignations. Rebecca tried to defend herself, but every answer made it worse. Finally, Paul stood up and said, "I move that we suspend the current board and hold a special election in 30 days. Someone seconded it. The rep said that was not on the agenda. Paul said it does not matter. This is a general meeting and residents have the right to make motions. The rep looked at his notes. Then he said, "Fine, we will take a vote." The motion passed 43-6. Rebecca tried to storm out, but Angela stopped her. "Rebecca, before you go, we need your motion on record." Rebecca froze. She looked around the room. Her face was bright red. She sat back down and did not say another word for the rest of the meeting. The election happened 4 weeks later. I did not run. I did not want to be on the board. But Paul did, and so did Angela and 2 other neighbors who had been fined unfairly. They all won. Rebecca did not run for re-election. Steve resigned the day after the vote. The new board's first act was to hire an independent attorney to review the covenants and draft a new enforcement policy. The second act was to approve refunds for everyone who had been fined under the fake snow rules. I got a check for $600. The third act was to formally apologize to me in writing and to clear my compliance record. The letter was signed by Paul as the new board president. I framed it. The small claims hearing happened in early March. The snow was mostly gone by then, but the case was still fresh. I showed up with my binder and my attorney on speakerphone. The HOA sent a lawyer who had clearly not read the file. He tried to argue that I had been non-compliant and that the fines were justified. I presented the city ordinance, the covenant pages, the trespassing videos, and the witness statements. The judge listened for about 10 minutes, then held up his hand. "Counsel, does your client have any evidence that this rule exists in writing?" The lawyer shuffled papers. He said the board interpreted the covenants in good faith. The judge said that is not what I asked. "Do you have the rule in writing?" The lawyer admitted he did not. The judge ruled in my favor and ordered the HOA to pay me $800 plus court costs. He also said the HOA compliance process needs to be audited and cleaned up, and if I see another case like this, I am going to start issuing sanctions. The lawyer nodded, and left quickly. I walked out of the courthouse with my attorney still on the phone. He was laughing. "That was beautiful. You just set a precedent for every HOA case in this county." I said I just wanted my gate access back. He said, "You got a lot more than that. You got justice." I hung up and drove home. My house sold 3 weeks later. The buyers were a young couple with a toddler. They asked about the HOA during the walkthrough. I told them the board had changed recently and the new leadership was much more reasonable. I did not mention Rebecca. I did not need to. She had moved out of the neighborhood 2 months earlier, quietly, without telling anyone. Paul told me she bought a condo in Dallas with no HOA. I wished her well from a distance. The new snow policy was published in May. It was 3 pages long, written in plain English with clear standards and a neutral appeal process. Violations had to be documented with photos showing the actual obstruction. Fines could not exceed $50 per incident and could not double. Disputes had to be heard within 10 days and decided by a panel of 3 residents, not the board. The policy included a proof standard. The HOA had to show that the violation existed in the covenants or the city code, in writing, before enforcement could proceed. It was everything I had fought for. And it happened because I refused to back down, because I documented everything, and because I found allies who were willing to stand with me. Rebecca tried to make an example of me. Instead, I made an example of her. And the neighborhood is better for it. The county audit report came back in June. It found that the Quarry Ridge Frostline Community Association had violated Texas HOA statutes in 14 separate instances over the last 2 years, including improper notice procedures, unapproved fee increases, and enforcement of rules that were not in the governing documents. The management company was fined. The old board members, including Rebecca, received written warnings for harassment behavior. The association was required to adopt new compliance procedures and to submit quarterly reports for the next year. I got a copy of the report in the mail. I read it once, filed it, and moved on. I did not need revenge. I just needed the system to work. And in the end, it did. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.